computer. Hi, Jacqueline. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Lisa?
Yeah, excellent. So for those watching, we are here because we can't work out Facebook Live. The technology was just doing something stupid. So we figured we really don't want to not cover Ghee and inflammation because it's such an important subject. And if you're like me and, you're not 19 and bouncing out of bed in the morning and instead you're waking up and you have a few aches and pains, or perhaps your gut health's not that great, you've got some inflammation going on, then it's a good topic to have some knowledge on. Now, I don't know a lot about this, and this is why I've called Jacqueline to the rescue, because she's the expert in all things Ghee when it comes to Ayurveda. And how it affects our body. So welcome, Jacqueline. And if I could start with the question, really, really broad, Ghee and inflammation, what's it all about?
Well, it is an excellent and broad question. And Ghee is so incredibly good for inflammation. And it can work both locally and systemically, like through the whole body. So like you said, Lisa, when you're waking up with aches and pains, there's a level of inflammation there in the body, more cytokines, more prostaglandins, these sort of reactors, inflammatory reactors in the body. So Ghee, because it is, as we've covered before, so beautifully subtle and goes deep into our tissues, it does have such a soothing effect. But we'll get into the nuts and bolts of it as well.
So what is inflammation? Because our body does things that are good for us as well, right?
It's if there's a wound, inflammation comes to the site, bringing the white blood cells and the defense force to bring repair, to bring extra blood flow. So it's not like inflammation is always bad, but inflammation can be a sign that there's too much Pitta or too much fire energy, too much heat in the body. It can also occur when there's too much toxins, or what we call AMA, AMA in Ayurveda, and that kind of sticky sludge that's a byproduct of poor digestion leaks into our circulation, lodges itself into weak spots, and we've all got different weak spots, and aggravates the tissue there, which can then create inflammation. So it's like a mini wound because the cells there are being attacked or aggravated by these toxins. And so the body comes in as a way, again, of trying to repair. But if the cause of that inflammation, of that AMA, is not being removed or dealt with, then it just becomes this constant low grade or high grade, depending on how long it's been going on for or how much cause is still there. And the body just gets into a pattern of that's how it is.
Okay, so I'm thinking of like a tennis elbow, or sore, like in arthritis, you've got sore joints. So the inflammation could come because I overused it, for example, and then that would be a good thing, right? And the inflammation comes in to help. You've got a beautiful cat there, have you? Can we see the cat?
She's found my lap, yes.
Nice. Or if it's lodged, say, in my elbow because it gets I've been eating crap food and, it's been going on for a long time, then that's like a bad inflammation. So there's that's very simplistic, right? But
it's a great example because there's usually more than one cause. So it could be overuse of the area, like you're saying, if you've just been using that joint constantly, that creates wear and tear, which just naturally happens in our lives. It creates dryness and the friction that can create inflammation. So dryness is another cause of inflammation. In arthritis, there's a few different types of arthritis. Primarily osteoarthritis, which is the dryness that happens over a lifetime, and then combine that with the AMA that I mentioned that, often lodges in joints, and especially of the extremities, because there's less blood flow in our extremities, the finger joints and the feet joints. So they tend to be the areas where that kind of arthritis happens first. And then there's the rheumatoid arthritis, which is a very inflammatory condition. It's more of an autoimmune condition. So in both conditions, the ghee can help because it's lubricating. It's like, think of it really simply as oiling a joint. Like when you've got stiffness, you've got put a bit of oil on that joint, and and that can be done externally with self-massage. Now, ghee can be used for self-massage, but it tends to get a bit expensive. But because ghee has that wonderful quality of soaking into all of our tissues, it lubricates the joints really well.
So are you telling me, let's use the tennis elbow example, that if I was to like massage some ghee on that continuously, I don't know, 3 times a day for, a while, that would actually help?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
really?
For thousands of years, ghee's been used both internally and externally, because it has, ghee has so many amazing properties, and it's anti-inflammatory. And we say that, but what makes it anti-inflammatory? So it's really rich in butyric acid, which is one of the short chain fatty acids that make ghee so amazing, and it's one of the most important fatty acids for the whole body. So what it does, that butyric acid, supports the gut in creating the right environment for good digestion. The ghee also soothes the lining of the gut, and helps to repair leaky gut or inflammatory gut, peptic ulcers, ulcerative colitis, IBS.
Because they're all inflammatory, right?
Exactly. It's all inflammatory. It's all, well, if we go back to the dosas, that gets a bit more complex, but with all of them, there's always some pitta involved. And whenever there's inflammation, there's always some pitta involved. But
so just for the listeners, when if they haven't listened to like the earlier part of this series, and I encourage you to go and do so, what Jacqueline's referring to is in Ayurveda, and like a lot of traditional medicine, there's the principle of the 5 elements. And within those, so let's just name them for everyone. So what is it? Earth, fire, water, air, and then ether, which is even lighter than air. So that's like space. So, when we're talking about the joints, for example, which we're talking about here, that's actually it's a bone, so it's earth. But if you think of a bone, it's really, really hollow, right? There's lots of spaces in there. So that's earth, and it's the space. And then you've got all the lubrication around it, so it's water. And what Jacqueline is saying is there's a lot of heat, so a lot of fire in the inflammation condition. And what's fire do when you think about it as an element? Fire burns things up, but it needs air to be there.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I'm guessing like we're in autumn now, right? And there's more air about. So would that mean that people that have a propensity for inflammation, say within their joints, would be feeling it more as we come into the colder and, blowier type of things? I'm not an Ayurvedic practitioner. I'm just kind of thinking through the elements.
I love how you brought all 5 elements into the analogy of the joint, because it's true, all elements are everywhere in the body, and the joints are a great example, because there is that air inside, the lightness of the bones, but the density of it is the earth, and then the lubrication is the water, and there's always some fire element in there as well. And you're right, the wind fans the fire, and at this time of autumn, there is a lot more of that wind energy. The temperature's dropping, so there's coldness. The vata is disturbed by the change of the season. So, and the vata is the wind energy in the body. And so
yes. So I better just, sorry, Jack, for interrupting, but for those people that have just, they didn't listen to the first one. So the principle of this Ayurvedic, of these what they call doshas is how the elements are presented in each individual body. So we're all made up of all 5 elements, which Jacqueline was just explaining there, but depending on how that makeup is in the body, you know, so you look at Jacqueline, she's quite fine, whereas you look at me, I'm more solid built. So we've got the elements are all there, but there's different ways it shows up in the body. And Ayurveda categorize those as a way of going, okay, well, what's this person's, what they call dosha, what's their constitution? And so when Jacqueline says Vata, that is a name that they give for what's Vata, Jack? It's air and
the space, the ether.
And space. So that's really airy. And then she said Pitta, which is fire and
moisture, fire and water together.
Fire and water. Yeah. Okay. And the last one's Kapha, which is water and earth. So they're the three main ones. And then the way they move together makes you an individual, makes you unique. So even though it's kind of this categorization that happens, it's so very deeply individual.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. And it is, we're all this beautiful individual makeup of these five elements, and the three doshas are they're really, I'd like to describe the doshas of a way of describing how those five elements work in the body. I think you might have said that as well, Lisa. And they're not a substance, but they're bioenergies, they're forces in their body. And, but they do govern certain areas of the body. So whenever there is some inflammation, there is some Pitta there, that fire energy, but it could be being aggravated, as you brought in, Lisa, with the wind, because we need the wind to fan the fire. So sometimes it's pure hot heat, and sometimes it's the wind is the driving force of it as well.
And I guess that's why you get burning sensations, don't you?
Yes.
You get the aching and the pain, but there is also a burning sensation. And you can see, like, when we look at like thousands and thousands of years ago, that would have been the language that they would have had to describe what was going on.
That's it. They didn't have cytokines, and they didn't recognize what they did recognize was phenomenal, but they didn't have the same language.
Yeah, because science is catching up.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So at this time of year, if you do wake up more stiff and achy, it is driven by that Vata, the wind energy. And it whenever we're cold, there's contraction. So it's not necessarily inflammation when you're waking up and feeling that stiffness. It can just be the contraction that the cold weather and the stiffness in the morning can be a sign of the Vata that just moves with movement. But when there is, that low-grade inflammation, if the cytokines and leukotrienes are higher in the body, Ghee, the butyric acid and the omega-3s, all the composition of what Ghee has elicits a soothing immune response that brings down those inflammatory markers in the body. So coming back to our digestion, it's incredibly good locally, because we ingest Ghee. Well, we can also rub it on areas, but most of the time we ingest the Ghee.
Don't waste your jar.
That's right.
A little bit drops off. I always sort of massage my skin because it's been used for thousands of years as a moisturizer, and I can't wait. So I've got to do a little video on 100 wash.
I was going to mention that today.
But I think we've got something coming up on the skin, and we can talk about that then. But don't waste your Ghee. If a little bit drops, I always do my my rough elbows, and do around your wrists and yeah.
So it's incredibly good for soothing skin. It can be used topically with this 100 washed Ghee, which is rinsing Ghee in water 10 times, rubbing it around, blending it together with hands ideally, and then tipping the excess water off and doing that 10 more times, so it becomes 100 washed Ghee, and it turns into this white cream. It's
emulsification, isn't it?
Emulsification of the Ghee, of the fats there, which break them down and make them more readily absorbable through the skin, and incredibly soothing. So any rashes and burns, even, it can be used there.
So
but also wrinkles and dryness.
For those watching, that 100 wash Ghee is like Pond's cream. That's what it comes out of. It's that really thick. Does Pond's even exist now? I think Nivea bought them over, but think of the Nivea cream, but I don't know, 50 times thicker, like a Sorbeline, but really, really smooth. Yeah, it's beautiful stuff. Yeah.
So let's come back to the gut. So ghee not only provides butyric acid, but it helps the body to build its own butyric acid as well. So that then helps, throughout the whole body, those inflammatory markers come down. And it does, because it has such an amazing subtle, effect. It goes deep into our tissues and can carry herbs into the tissues as well. So in Ayurveda, we cook certain herbs into the ghee when we're processing it. And that can be used medicinally, even more medicinally than just pure ghee, which is also already incredibly medicinal. And you might be familiar, listeners, with turmeric being also incredibly anti-inflammatory. And there's a lot of products on the market that are selling the pure curcumin, which is the isolated part of the turmeric, which is good for inflammation. But in Ayurveda, we don't like to separate things, because there's beauty and there's intelligence in the whole food. So rather than spending lots of money on buying curcumin tablets, which can be, when you isolate something like that, turmeric does have a heating effect, so it can be counterproductive.
Too heating.
Yeah, because we're isolating this one thing and it's hitting hard, and the liver's got to process everything as well. So if you want to have a play around at home, you could chop up some fresh turmeric root and add that to the butter pot when you're cooking your own ghee, and infuse the ghee with turmeric. Add a tiny pinch of black pepper, which helps to make the curcumin more bioavailable in the body as well. So if you do have inflammation in joints, that stiffness in every morning or soreness every morning, or throughout the day, then cooking turmeric into your ghee is a beautiful way of bringing together the anti-inflammatory properties of both substances, but they're also both antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal. So they share all of these properties, which makes it a really beautiful, harmonious.
I'm just thinking, Jacqueline, as you're talking about cooking the turmeric, and I'm like, oh yeah, but what could I use it for? And I just want to let everyone know that eggs cooked in turmeric ghee is like amazing. They're really nice. So I'm glad that you went there. Let's talk about the kitchen pharmacy before we're going to run out of time. So what are some things that our listeners can do to go, okay, I'm feeling a little bit achy. What can I incorporate into my diet where I'm not going to have to, go to some shop I'm really not familiar with and I feel uncomfortable of reaching out? What have I got in my kitchen, perhaps, that will, besides ghee, what else, or how do I take my ghee to use it medicinally as opposed to just buttering my bread?
Yeah. Well, I just was thinking as you were speaking as well, Lisa, that the simpler way of making turmeric ghee is to buy Lisa's beautiful ghee, stir in some turmeric. Like, you can have your ghee for your cooking.
So powdered turmeric, I could use powdered turmeric. Okay.
Yep. So I've often recommended clients to make their own little pot of turmeric ghee, where you just get 1/4 teaspoon in maybe 100 grams of ghee, melt the ghee a little bit, stir it in, little pinch of black pepper, and then you can take that first thing, 1/2 teaspoon, 1/4 teaspoon, first thing in the morning with some warm water. Wait at least half an hour before eating, and then
so don't have it with food. I couldn't put it on my oats, for example.
No, it's better if you're wanting something to be medicinal in the body, it's better to take it before food and let it just soak in the tissues, do its job, and then introduce other foods. And
that's going to help heal my gut as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So if I took it on them, so actually that's ghee in the morning. Now that I'm thinking about it, if anyone was to have like 1/2 teaspoon of ghee, just as you said there, a little bit of turmeric and black pepper with warm water, not only am I going to help, say, with inflammation throughout my whole body, it's going to help with my gut, especially because it's first thing. And then it's got that whole weight loss thing going along with it as well, because they have ghee in the morning for weight loss.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, double whammy. Oh, I always like things where it's like leverage. Leverage. That's what we like.
Yeah.
And how else could we have it?
Well, using ghee just in your food. So whether it's on toast, on bread, stirred in porridge, for curries, for the basis of soups, curries. I pretty much use ghee in all of my cooking, except if I'm looking for that Mediterranean flavor, then olive oil is good. But honestly, I'll use it in everything else. So it's such a wonderful base, even stir fries, because it's got such a high smoke point. So we can just having ghee in the diet will help to soothe inflammation in the whole body, because it knows where to go to. If there's inflammation, the ghee, it soaks in, it goes to where it's needed.
It's so intelligent. Sorry, our bodies are so intelligent.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it knows where to go.
We're having ghee in our digestive tract is, as you said, helping digestion itself. Then we're creating less toxins, less armor, which is less, aggravating to our,
which is less inflammation.
Exactly, to our tissues, and less inflammation. So, it helps topically by supporting digestion, by healing ulcers, irritable bowel. It's very good for, as I mentioned, ulcerative colitis. And modern science is using ghee as enemas for people with ulcerative colitis, which we've done in Ayurveda for thousands of years. So it's applying it to the site of the disease, which is in the large intestine and to a degree in the small intestine. So to do, get it in from both ends is really helpful.
It's like a ghee wash.
That's it.
With your car, they do the whole oil change.
And if you have inflamed eyes, ghee is also incredibly good for the eyes. So it's good.
So what if you've been on your computer too long and your eyes are really tight? So how would we do that? Is it just like a teaspoon on our fingers and sort of like that, or is it actually on the eyeball?
In the eye itself is even better. So you can sort of smear some around, but the better way to do it is to gently melt some ghee, so it's not hot, but it is liquid, and just put a couple of drops in each eye before bed, because it's oily, it will make your eyes bleary. So you don't want to then try to drive or do your work on the computer. So before bed is a good time to do that, and it's incredibly soothing. If you get blepharitis, if you get inflamed, dry eyes, bloodshot eyes, as you said, the strain of too much computer, hay fever, it's
just going to say my husband suffers from hay fever and gets the whole itchy eye. So that before bed is worth giving it a go.
And and also just having ghee in the diet, which I'm sure your husband will, and others.
Absolutely. He goes more ghee than I do.
and again, so we can look at it topically as it's helping the eyes, but when we're ingesting ghee, it helps strengthen the eyes as well, and helps the body become less reactive, because it's always soothing. Ghee soothes the pitta, soothes the fire energy in the body, and when the fire energy gets too high, we become more reactive, we become more sensitive, and we become more inflammatory. So having ghee in the diet that soothes that pitta energy, and everybody's different, some people have more of the fire energy than others, but just having it as part of your diet helps to soothe both the pitta, the fire, and the vata, because it counteracts the dryness there. And those two are the ones that tend to create the inflammation more than the kapha. Kapha can, when it gets really sticky and stuck, and then if things aren't flowing well, inflammation might form, but it's less likely. So just on that, broad general level, it's the pitta and the vata, the ghee, the fire, and the
main culprits.
And they're the main culprits of the.
Okay, now just one last, mindful of the time. Just one last question, because this really did my head in, and I would love to get your opinion on this. I looked, when I was looking at inflammation, I'm doing a Google search, and they talk about inflammation of the skin, and I can understand when it comes from the body, and the inflammation is coming out and you're seeing it there as a rash or something like that, how ghee would be super soothing. But they talked about it for burns. And I know, you know, our grandma's generation, you had a burn before we were told to put the cool water on it. It was like, oh, put butter on it. Right. And then we've been told, no, that's not the thing. So I'd love to know what Ayurveda's thinking is on the whole burn thing.
Yeah, it's a great question.
I know it's probably a little bit, oh God, what's the word?
Controversial.
Yeah, controversial.
And
but, you know, we're reading all this stuff. We need to have good answers.
I don't have personal experience with using ghee for burns because I don't even remember if I was taught that, but I have read it. And I have, you know, seen it in some text. So I don't know if I'm actually able to answer that question, but it's made me very curious as well. And I think the best way to treat burns with ghee, it would be with that 100 washed ghee, the Pitta, because of its cooling. I mean, ghee is cooling anyway, but the absorption of the 100 washed ghee being so much greater would, I think, be really beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, we're not talking about first aid. Yeah, and we're not talking about burns first aid. First aid is always under cool water because you want to get it cool. Right, that's the first thing you want to do. But perhaps after, and that, you know, it's come down and we're talking about healing the skin, that's where perhaps ghee or 100 wash ghee would be beneficial.
Yes, I think it would, but I honestly, I haven't had that personal experience with using it.
Yeah, because then I guess it's just a skin that you're trying to heal, because the burns already happened. You've already done the first aid. You know, it might be a day or two on, and we're just I don't know, but I thought I would ask. Right, we don't know everything.
That's it.
But it was interesting.
But I mean, I you know, because ghee is so high in the anti-inflammatory properties and so antibacterial, antifungal, so healing, just makes sense to me that it would work really well.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right, so we've covered a whole heap, and we've gone into eyes where we've got one for a whole conversation on eyes, so we can go deeper onto that, and we've got something coming up about the gut, so we can go deeper into that. But it was good to have this conversation first, and I'm glad we ended up, you know, maybe the universe knows, I'm glad that we ended up recording it this way, Jacqueline. So now our listeners have got a really great overview of inflammation, some of the doshas and the Ayurvedic principles, and how that goes, because a lot of things that show up in the body is inflammatory.
Yes.
Yeah. So even though we're going to go talk about the gut, it's a lot of the time an inflammatory condition, or we're going to talk about the eyes, a lot of the time it's inflammatory condition, but we'll talk a little bit deeper about that. So thank you so much for today. That's great. We've sort of kept it to the nice timeline, which is good, because no one's got time to listen to us ramble for hours.
Oh, we could go on and on.
Hence why we're breaking it up. So thank you, and I will see you next month, and I'll post in the Facebook group, guys, about what next month's topic is.
And if you have any questions, pop them in the Facebook group, and
do that.
We'll both chime in there and try to answer your questions for you too.
Yes, good. And you know, sometimes we don't know, but ciao.